Can we take our seats, please? Okay. Good evening. It's the hush moment. Welcome to the 319th dinner meeting of the Economic Club of Chicago. In the interest of time and because we have such a wonderful turnout tonight, we're going to forego the regular 10-minute intermission tonight, so if you need to leave the room, please do so before the program begins at 7:40. As you know, tonight I become the immediate past chairman of the club, and I want to tell you it's been a great pleasure and a lot of fun to serve as your chairman for the past 2 years. I have the honor this evening of turning over the gavel to our new chairman, William Daly, Bill Daly, chairman of Midwest Region, J.P. Morgan Chase & Company, with warm wishes for a most successful term as the 42nd chairman of the club. Bill, congratulations to you.
Thanks, Miles. Thank you. Thanks very much, Miles. Thank you very much, Miles. I do appreciate your good wishes and obviously your continued support of this great club. I've already had the pleasure of experiencing the cooperation and the commitment of members of the different committees of the club and gratefully accept this responsibility. Now, Miles, if I can ask you to please stand for a moment. It is my privilege to honor you with a special presentation of a certificate of life membership in the Economic Club of Chicago. This is given in recognition of your outstanding leadership and your dedication to the preservation of the ideals and the traditions of this great club. Please accept it with our sincere appreciation for the many accomplishments during your term of office and for a job well done. Now, if I can find it. That's not a good way to start. There is no certificate up here, Miles, but trust me, the club appreciates it, and I'll get your certificate.
I have 2,000 witnesses, right? Thank you, Bill.
Now, please, all of you enjoy your dinner. The program will resume at exactly 7:40 p.m. Thank you.
Get two, and then you're out. You know, you're passé.
If we could bring the room to order, please. Again, welcome to the 319th Economic Club dinner. Tonight's program is unique. Because of the tremendous response to this dinner, Al Gore will deliver his remarks in this room, and it will be broadcast in the second ballroom with our fellow guests. He will then proceed to that ballroom for the question and answer session, which will be broadcast back here for your viewing. I'd like to make a few announcements about the upcoming club season. On Friday, November 2nd, we will be hosting a special luncheon in collaboration with the Chicago Council on Global Affairs. The guest speaker is Dr. Jacques Roga, President of the International Olympic Committee. We hope that all of you will be able to join us in welcoming him to Chicago at this very special meeting. Please get your reservations in as soon as possible. Our first forum of the 2007-2008 program year will be held on Wednesday, November 14th at the Hyatt Regency. This special forum, titled Reflections on a Merger, will feature the two best-known exchange leaders, Terry Duffy, Executive Chairman of the newly formed CME Group, and former chairman of the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, and Charlie Carey, the vice chairman of CME Group and former chairman of the Chicago Board of Trade. This merger has created the world's largest and most diverse exchange. You'll hear the inside story of how this historic merger was achieved, and we hope you will join us for what promises to be a most fascinating behind-the-scenes story. The December dinner this year will be held on Monday, December 3rd, at the Hilton Chicago Hotel. We're excited to welcome the well-respected film director, producer, and screenwriter, George Lucas. All of these upcoming events are listed on our website. And now it is my pleasure to introduce those at the speakers table. As I call their names, I'll ask each to stand and remain standing until the introductions are completed, so please hold your applause till all have been introduced. Beginning at my far left, Carrie Ann Haas, partner, Michael Best and Friedrich. Robert Jordan, managing partner, Interim CEO, Inc. William R. Quinlan, managing partner, Quinlan and Carroll Limited. The Honorable Neil F. Hartigan, chairman and CEO, World Trade, Chicago. Manny Sanchez, managing partner, Sanchez, Daniels and Hoffman, and a director of the club. J.B. Pritzker, managing partner, the Pritzker Group. Marshall Bouton, president, the Chicago Council on Global Affairs. Dr. Richard L. Sandner, chairman and CEO, Chicago Climate Exchange. Michael W. Farrow, Jr., chairman and CEO, Merrick Ventures, and a director of the club. Valerie B. Jarrett, president, the Habitat Company. Philip B. Rooney, chairman, Claddagh Investments, and past chairman of the club. Charles L. Evans, senior vice president and director of research, Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago. Samuel C. Scott III, chairman, president, and CEO, Corn Products International, and member of the executive committee. Norman R. Bobbins, chairman emeritus, LaSalle Bank Corporation, and director of the club. Well deserved. Lester Crown, chairman, Henry Crown and Company, and member of the executive committee. Patricia A. Wirtz, chairman, president, and CEO, Archer Daniels Midland Company, and also a director of the club. The Honorable Richard M. Daley, Mayor of the City of Chicago. I wouldn't dare say don't do that. Miles D. White, chairman, Abbott Laboratories, and immediate past chairman of the club. And now to my far right, Gregor Androwicz, general manager, the Drake Hotel. Craig Sieben, president, Sieben Energy Associates. Michael Polsky, president and CEO, Invergeny LLC. Ellen S. Alberding, president, the Joyce Foundation. Russ Strobel, chairman and president and CEO, Nicor Inc. The Honorable James M. Houlihan, assessor, Cook County. Robert J. Stucker, chairman, Vetter Price. Larry D. Richmond, executive vice president, LaSalle Bank Corporation. Ellen M. Costello, CEO, Harris Bank Corporation, and director of the club. James A. Gordon, founder and managing partner of the Edgewater Funds. Jonathan P. Ward, chairman, Chicago Lazard Ferrers and Company, and also a director of the club. John A. Canning Jr., chairman, Madison Dearborn Partners, and director of the club. William A. Osborne, chairman and CEO, Northern Trust Corporation, and director of the club. Edward M. Liddy, chairman and CEO, Allstate Insurance Company, and director of the club. Linda Johnson Rice, president and CEO, Johnson Publishing Company, and chair of the program committee. And now a round of applause for our distinguished group. Again, thank you all for coming tonight to hear from one of America's leading statesmen and a great friend of the city of Chicago and to many people in this room. It is indeed a personal honor to me also that he would be here at the first dinner of my chairmanship of the Economic Club. When we talk about the qualities that make a great leader, we often use the term vision. People of vision not only have big ideas about the future, but they can also see what's coming. And they can help us plan and adapt to the change. Al Gore's vision of the future was shaped by his service in Vietnam, his early work as a crusading young journalist in Tennessee, and 24 years in public office. 8 years in the House, 8 years in the Senate, and 8 years as Vice President of the United States. His public service career is notable for his passionate views on protecting the environment, his forceful advocacy for increased investment in technology, and his measured and informed voice on international relations. Above all, however, what stands out about Al Gore's years in government is that history has now proven him right on so many major issues of our time. He was one of the few Democratic senators to support President George H.W. Bush in the first war in Iraq, which was one of the most successful military operations in our nation's history. Al Gore was one of the early outspoken critics of the current Iraq war, even as many members of his own party quelled their doubts and stood by the president. Long before the rest of the world was sending emails, Al Gore championed the power and the potential of the internet and helped pass key legislation to broaden access to this technology. As vice president, he chaired a commission on reinventing government and brought common sense, market-driven reforms to institutions that had resisted reforms for decades. Al Gore also raised the alarm about airport security years before the 9/11 and made a series of recommendations, some of which are still awaiting action, even as we invest more and more money each year to make our planes and airports safer. He was a leading voice for free trade when it was toxic to Democrats and played a critical role in passing the North American Free Trade Agreement. His debate with Ross Perot on Larry King remains one of the most watched shows in CNN's history. Finally, Al Gore was right about global warming decades before anyone was paying serious attention to this issue. His best-selling book, Earth in the Balance, and his Oscar-winning documentary, An Inconvenient Truth, have put the issue of climate change on the front burner of American politics. They have also earned Al one of the highest honors in the world. As everyone knows, last week he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, elevating his substantial profile on this issue of global warming even higher. He joins a small handful of Americans that receive this distinguished honor, including former President Teddy Roosevelt, Martin Luther King, and former President Jimmy Carter. Today, Al Gore occupies a unique place in American public life. He participates in civic debate through film, books, TV, and the web. He lectures constantly, runs a television channel, serves on boards, an unofficial advisor to Google, and still manages to live the life of a gentleman farmer in Carthage, Tennessee. Earlier this year, Al Gore published The Assault on Reason, a book that raises a host of disturbing questions about the sorry state of public discourse in America. He argues that honest, fact-based debate and reasoned discussion has been lost to 30-second television ads, slanted science, and partisan politics. Like An Inconvenient Truth, The Assault on Reason implores Americans of goodwill to come together and engage in a broad civic conversation on America's future in a changing world. 7 years ago, Al Gore won the popular vote for president by 500,000 votes. 36 days later, 36 days later, after the Supreme Court ruled that he had lost, Al Gore conceded the election with an inspiring call for unity in support of the president-elect. He got one thing wrong in that speech, however, when he said that his only regret is that he won't get the chance to stay and fight for the American people. Al Gore is not only still fighting for the American people, he has taken that fight for our future across the globe. George Bernard Shaw said that a leader does not follow the well-worn path, but goes instead where there is no path and leaves the trail. Al Gore has blazed a new trail forward for America and the world. His plea for open and honest debate could not come at a more critical time in our nation's history. So please join me in welcoming an American leader, a man of uncommon vision, and the winner of the 2007 Nobel Peace Prize, Al Gore.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Bill. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Boy, it is great to be here, and Bill Daley, thank you very much for that generous introduction. Many of you know that Bill and I are especially close friends, and it is a great honor for me personally to be here on the occasion of him taking the gavel for this great economic club of Chicago. And to the outgoing chair, Miles White, I want to say congratulations to you on your leadership, and to all of the board and the distinguished guests, thank you very much. It's an honor, of course, to be here with His Honor the Mayor. Rich Daley is also a very good friend, and I want to acknowledge Maggie Daley, the First Lady of the City of Chicago. Please stand, Maggie. This, of course, is such an extraordinary family, and I've had the privilege of knowing Bill's son, Billy, and I've gotten caught up on all the grandchildren. And Maura, bless you, so glad to see you here. You tell Lauren I'm proud of her for finishing the Chicago Marathon in 3 hours and 20 minutes. That was quite an accomplishment. To Cook County Assessor James Houlihan, sir, thank you. State Treasurer Alex Giannoulis is here somewhere. To the reception chairs, Gregor Andreevich and Carrie Ann Hasse and Grace Berry. To my good friends Neil Hartigan and Barbara and many others, Mike Cherry, Brian McPartland. I'm seeing so many great friends here. I want to begin, ladies and gentlemen. Well, first of all, I am Al Gore. I used to be the next president of the United States of America. I don't think that's particularly funny. Put yourselves in my position for a minute. I flew on Air Force Two for 8 years, and now I've got to take off my shoes to get on an airplane. I always tell us when they do the body search, I always say, well, I was mad after the election, but I wasn't going to do anything like that. Just one quick story before I share what I came here to say with you, just to illustrate the emotional whiplash of that experience. Not long after I left my job in the White House, I was driving with my wife, Tipper, and Tipper sends her love, Maggie, and everyone. I was driving with my wife, Tipper, from our home in Nashville to our farm in Carthage, Tennessee, about 50 miles away. We were driving ourselves. I realize that sounds like a little thing to most of you. But I looked in the rearview mirror, and all of a sudden it just hit me. There was no motorcade back there. You've heard of phantom limb pain? This was a rented Ford Taurus. And it was dinner time, so we looked for a place to eat, and we got off the interstate highway, and we found a Shoney's restaurant, low-cost family restaurant chain. And we walked in, sat down at the booth, and the waitress came over, made a big commotion over Tipper. Then she took our order and went to the couple in the booth sitting next to us, and she lowered her voice so much I had to really strain to hear what she was saying. And she said, yes, that's former Vice President Al Gore and his wife Tipper. And the man said, he's come down a long way, hasn't he? It was an awakening. But continuing a true story, the very next day I flew to Africa, to the nation of Nigeria, to give a speech in Lagos on energy policy. And I began my speech by telling that story in the same terms I've just told it to you. Tipper and I driving ourselves, Shoney's, low-cost family restaurant chain, what that man said, and they laughed. And I gave my speech and then went back out to the airport to fly home. And I fell asleep on the plane until in the middle of the night, we landed for refueling on the Azores Islands. And I woke up and they opened the door to let some fresh air in. And I walked out on that platform. And here came a man waving a piece of paper, just running toward the plane and yelling, "Call Washington! Call Washington!" And I thought to myself, here we are in the middle of the night, middle of the Atlantic Ocean. What in the world could be wrong in Washington? And then I remembered it could be a bunch of things. But what it turned out to be was that one of the wire service reporters in Nigeria had already written a story about my speech and had been printed everywhere, all across the United States. I must have 100 copies of this story. And my staff was very concerned because the story began, former Vice President Al Gore announced in Nigeria yesterday, quote, "My wife Tipper and I have opened a low-cost family restaurant named Shoney's, and we are running it ourselves." Before I could get back to the U.S., Jay Leno and David Letterman had already had a field day with this. And one of them had me in a big chef's hat. Tipper was yelling and scribbling, "One more burger with fries." 3 days later, I got a nice long handwritten letter from my friend and former partner Bill Clinton saying, "Congratulations on the new restaurant, Al." We like to celebrate each other's successes in life. So now I'm a recovering politician on about step 9. And I'll tell you, one of the prettiest things that I love the most about Chicago are those concrete flower pots that Rich has put everywhere. Don't y'all love those? Bill tells me you don't know how to grow a potato plant or a tomato plant. And I told him that I'll go in with him if we want to get a concrete tomato planter out there. Is that all right, Maggie? But in all seriousness, what has happened in this city, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about this climate crisis and what a great opportunity it is for American business, and it really is. But I want to just draw your attention to the fact that under Rich Daley and the folks that have been helping him so well, and I want to compliment Adele Simmons, who is co-chairing the Climate Change Task Force in Chicago, and I met several of the young people who are working so hard on that. Chicago has, under Rich's leadership, conducted energy efficiency retrofits in over 15 million square feet of government facilities, become a founding member of the Chicago Climate Exchange, and my friend Richard Sandor is here. Founded the Chicago Smart Bulb Program, which has distributed 500,000 CFL bulbs to residents. Started the Chicago Industrial Rebuild Program to do energy audits for the largest energy-using industries, and they have made Chicago one of the great leaders among all of the cities in the world, and I just want to say congratulations, Mayor Daley, for what Chicago is doing to help fight the climate crisis. Now, you know I've got a slideshow to try to put things in real clear and understandable terms. I want to give you a clear and understandable example of what these kinds of initiatives mean. If the daytime temperature here in Chicago is 70 degrees, you go outside and climb up to the roof of some buildings, including some government buildings here in Chicago that don't happen to be owned by the city, and you will find on a 70-degree day that a tar roof is 151 degrees. But on the roof of City Hall, it's 74 degrees, because anyone who thought that this emphasis on roof gardens was just kind of eccentric. Now, why the hell you think Rich Daley would do something eccentric, I have no idea. But if you think that this was one of them, this is really serious stuff. And cities around the world are now following Chicago's lead. And I asked some of the business leaders how Rich persuaded all these people to put these roof gardens on. And they said, well, he just said, please. Okay. Anyway, I did want to brag on you, Rich. It really is a great program. Ladies and gentlemen, I said that this is an opportunity. I don't use that just as a throwaway term. Some of you know that the word crisis, which is such a familiar phrase to us, probably is a word that's overused. I say phrase, I mean word. In Chinese and in Japanese, when they write the word crisis, they use two of those symbols together. And the scholars there tell me you take the first one by itself, it means danger. Second one by itself means opportunity. And actually, that's a better way of communicating what a crisis is all about. World War II was a crisis, and it became an occasion for an entire generation to gain moral authority and long-term vision. And they created a Marshall Plan in World War II, and Europe doesn't export world wars anymore. They're now unified thanks to the vision that came out of that crisis. The United Nations and the institutions that have given our world a better chance for peace and progress over the last several decades came out of that crisis. There have been plenty of similar examples going back through American history and going back farther than that. But this climate crisis is the most dangerous we've ever faced by far. It's also the greatest opportunity that our business community has ever faced. If we gain the momentum and the moral authority to make some of the changes to the rules of the road that help bring out what needs to happen now. What we're doing today, worldwide and in the U.S., is just, it can't go on. It just can't go on. Famous economist once said, if something can't go on, it won't. And one way or another, this won't keep going on. But the question is whether we make a transition in time to avoid a hard landing, because a hard landing globally with the global climate is unthinkable, really unthinkable. Our children demand better from us and have a right to expect more from us. You've heard the famous phrase, these are the best of times, these are the worst of times. The famous opening sentence from Charles Dickens' novel, A Tale of Two Cities. I want to share with you a very brief tale of two planets, Earth and Earth's neighbor Venus, both almost exactly the same size. Both have almost exactly the same amount of carbon. Difference being that here on Earth, the various life forms that have evolved over the hundreds of millions of years have scavenged most of the CO2 out of the atmosphere and have ended up sequestering it, burying it deep in the ground. That's where the oil and coal and everything comes from. But on Venus, it's still in the atmosphere. So, two planets, same size, same amount of carbon. In one, most of the carbon's in the ground. Here, the other, most of the carbon's in the atmosphere. What difference does it make? Well, the average annual temperature here on Earth is 59 degrees. On Venus, it's 867 degrees, which is above the melting point of lead, and it rains sulfuric acid. And I guarantee you, no matter how bad the weather forecast gets, it won't get that bad. But we are now engaged in a worldwide project of taking as much carbon out of the ground as quickly as we can and burning it very inefficiently in ways that leave all this residue in the atmosphere. You know how much CO2 we add every 24 hours to the atmosphere of the Earth? 70 million tons every single day. 70 million tons. And the atmosphere is pretty thin, up to the top of the sky is just a few miles. It's pretty thin. 1/1000th the thickness of the planet. And the number of molecules You know, it sounds like a big number, but actually it's not that big compared to that 70 million tons every single day. It adds up, and it's already added up, and the extra carbon is now trapping more of the heat from the sun, and the planet has a fever. Gone up a full degree already, and it's not going down, it's still on the way up. And now in Phoenix, they had 33 days in a row above 110 degrees this year. Phoenix is always hot, not that hot. Nighttime lows of 100. I was in Baja in Mexico just last week, and in Mexicali they had 124 degrees, and it was in that range for many days in a row. Pakistan this year is 126 degrees. Now, we've always had hot days, and 10 or 12 years ago, y'all had that bad heat wave in Chicago that killed 1,000 people. I believe it was 1,000. It was a lot of people died, and in Europe they lost 35,000 people a few years ago. But the scientists say much, much worse would come if we don't act, because we can't continue treating this atmosphere as an open sewer. And we don't think of it that way yet because CO2 is invisible and tasteless and odorless. And so the old saying, out of sight, out of mind, applies to it, and it's easy to ignore. But just as the old controversies of overpollution in years past have finally reached the stage where people said, enough already, we got to control this. Now we've reached that stage with CO2, except it's global, and China's got to be a part of the solution, and India's got to be a part of the solution. But you know the very best thing that can be done, the most important thing that can be done to improve the chances that China will join the world community in solving this, for the United States of America to start playing a leadership role in this, to do the right thing for a change. Start controlling this. It's good business as well, because a lot of course, the business community nationwide is way ahead of the political leadership, really. I mean, some exceptions to that, and I've bragged on Rich, and there are others I could mention, but by and large, the business leadership is way ahead of the political leadership. And a lot of companies have started to realize that pollution is waste. Who knew? If they go about reducing it in the right way, they can save money. You got to buy raw materials to make the pollution. You take a really controversial company like Walmart, for example. You know, they've never been accused of not knowing how to make a profit. But they were devastated by Hurricane Katrina, and one thing led to another, and they decided they were going to get serious about this climate crisis. And they had a company-wide meeting and brought all their managers in and their suppliers and subcontractors, and they began to analyze it systematically the way a good business does, and many of y'all here know exactly what I'm talking about. And they found a way where they can make money by reducing the waste. It just takes getting over the hump of inertia and deciding to do the right thing. And worldwide, we're beginning to see that happen. There are only 2 of the advanced countries in the world that haven't joined the world efforts to solve this, and the other one besides us is Australia. And the Prime Minister there just had to call an election on Sunday, and it'll be held November 26th, I believe, and the opposition leaders made the climate crisis the main issue, and he's 14 points ahead in the opinion polls. And I believe that it's not an accident that cities, Chicago leading the way, have been ahead of states, and states have been ahead of the federal government. In California, for example, Arnold Schwarzenegger saw my movie last year. He said, I'm going to get rid of my Hummer. That's a good thing. And actually, California's passed binding reductions. A number of other states have as well. So now it's our turn. And here in this great city, where common sense has just had a place of honor, and I don't say that to flatter you. I say it because y'all gave me 73% of the vote. And Rich and Bill are still looking for the rest of you, by the way. But in all seriousness, Chicago is the kind of city unique. There is no other city like Chicago. But Chicago is the kind of place that I think it's appropriate to have the carbon exchange, the climate exchange. This is the kind of place where this common sense go get them, solve the problem, do it right brand of leadership is so greatly needed for the rest of the world. And the business community in the rest of the world and in the rest of our country looks to Chicago. And they look to this club. And they understand what this leadership group is here and in the other room. I'm coming over there right after this. Thank you for being here as well. We really need your help. Now, before I close, I just want to make a couple of other points. There's an old African proverb that says, if you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Well, we need to go far, quickly. And that's the truth. And this challenge is right at the outer edge of what it's possible for us to do. And that's the truth. But it's right at that outer edge of possibility that throughout history, every historic decision that marks the survival or the fall of civilizations is made. That's where the decisions are made. And this is our challenge. This generation alive today, because of historical accident, because this burgeoning revolution of industry and carbon fuels. You know, a century ago when the Great World's Fair was here, we were in the dawn of the industrial age. And in 100 years, we have quadrupled the population on this planet in 100 years. And that's not the place to look to fix this crisis. It's a big part of the explanation for why we're suddenly a bull in the china shop. But that's stabilizing worldwide as girls are educated and women are empowered and family planning is made available in culturally acceptable ways and children survive at higher rates to give parents the confidence to have smaller families if that's what they want to have, which is what they usually want to have all around the world. And so that's stabilizing. It'll even out probably around 9 billion or so while my generation is still alive. But in 100 years, that's a big change. And an even bigger change since the Great World's Fair here is that our technologies have become more powerful by a factor of many thousands of times. And so the same kinds of habits and activities that once made no difference to the environment, now all of a sudden we can have a huge impact. And they've made our lives better in so many ways, but the unintended side effects are sometimes just not fully taken into account, and now is the time when we have to do that. But in order to grapple with this successfully and overcome it, we have got to change our way of thinking about our responsibility to the future. And I was talking earlier to a couple of friends. One of them said, you know, well, this problem is going to affect my children. And the answer is yes, it is. It is, your children and your grandchildren. But let me tell you a story, something that just, let's see, is 2 weeks ago. I went out to Boulder, Colorado. I changed my schedule to go and meet with 20 scientists for half a day at the Snow and Ice Data Center. And don't worry, I'm not going to give you the whole 9 yards, but at the equinox, just September 21, which marks the end of the warm half of the year in the Northern Hemisphere, that's when every year they take a snapshot of what's happened to the North Polar ice cap during the 6 months of sun, because then it starts to get cold again up there, and the sun goes down September 21st at the North Pole. So the previous record melting was 2005. This year, it fell off a cliff. That's their phrase, not mine. It fell off a cliff. An extra 23% melting below the all-time record before that time. So here's a way to think about this. For as far back as they can measure, the summertime size of the North Polar ice cap has been the size of the lower 48 states, give or take on Arizona. I mean, a little small amount, just about the lower 48. 2005, an amount melted that was everything east of the Mississippi River. And this year, another 15 states west of that. At the current rate, they told me it could be completely gone in summer within 20 years, and one of the computer models said it could be gone in 7 years. So when you say it's going to affect your children or your grandchildren, yes, it's going to affect us, no matter what we do. But don't give up hope, because the scientists who tell us these things also tell us in the next breath, don't give up hope, because we can still lick it. We can still solve it. But we don't have much time to get started. Now, I went back to my hotel room. You were talking about the assault on reason, Bill. This is honest truth. I went back to my hotel room, and I felt like that news should have been an alarm bell sounding in every capital city, in every nation on the surface of this planet. And I went back to my hotel room, and I switched from one network to the other, and two of them had bulletins. Britney Spears lost custody of her children. And I'm not saying that's not a legitimate news story. But we've been spending more time on the embalming of Anna Nicole Smith and Paris Hilton's antics and O.J. Simpson's return to the limelight and all of this stuff than we have been spending on questions that are crucial to the future of our children and grandchildren, and it is time that we demand better from the news media of this nation. And a lot of them are trying to do better. They really are. But I want to end by going back to that example of the generation that won World War II. When they returned, they're the ones who really started the Civil Rights Revolution. They're the ones that said, we're not going to put up with this anymore. Are you kidding me? And they helped to allow this country to seek to redeem its soul. And Martin Luther King Jr. said, years later, he said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Now, more CO2 global warming pollution anywhere on this planet is a threat to our future everywhere. So the kind of partnerships and common ground that we need to find with the poorer, less developed countries all around the world is not something where we, out of the goodness of our heart, decide to give something to those who have less. They are our brothers and sisters. We are riders on the same spaceship, or we are living on the same small planet. And their future is bound up with ours in a way that never used to be the case in the past. Literally, our survival is linked to theirs. But when that World War II generation came back, they began to do great things here at home. But in the rest of the world, they had that vision for the Marshall Plan, or they supported it, the United Nations. One of their generals, Omar Bradley, who became known as the GI's general, he wrote in 1947, now is the time, he said, when we need to set our course by the stars and not by the lights of every passing ship. What does it mean to set your course by the lights of every passing ship? Could it mean going by overnight public opinion polls? Could it mean a CEO directed by investors and board to manage to the next quarterly earnings report rather than positioning the company for sustainable success in the next decade and to build sustainable shareholder value? Does it mean TV and radio stations looking at sweeps weeks to determine whether or not the public interest standard has any meaning to them? Does it mean that all of us need to try to resist the short-term gratification and the short-term measures that are just thrown at us from every direction? Yeah, of course it does. But it means also that those of us alive today in this day and time have to accept a gift from history that we are the ones whose decisions and behaviors will shape the course of the future of the human race. Now that may sound grandiose and extreme and hard to believe, and all I can tell you is this. I've been talking to these scientists for 30 years. I've been trying to learn about this for 40 years. And I've been on real good personal terms with many of the best of them for 30 years. And in the last year and a half, they've started saying something they never said before. They've started saying, Al, we may have as little as 10 years in which to turn this thing around. Not to make all the changes, but to make big enough changes and a good enough start to turn the course of it. What do they mean? What could possibly happen? Well, all that CO2 pollution that's up there, there's another amount just equal to that that's frozen in Siberia and in the other places where there are vast expanses of frozen tundra. And if we keep on playing around with this, one of them said the climate's a sleeping monster and we're poking it with a stick. If we keep on playing around with this and let that thaw out, then the bogey we have to hit's twice as much. If we let the North Polar ice cap go and get beyond retrieval, then that's one of the principal ways the planet cools itself. If we let that heat destabilize Greenland, Antarctica, you get the point. And my main point in saying that is we have a responsibility. I wish I could say it. I wish I had the words to say it in a way that matches the depth of feeling I have about this. I swear I do. And I've tried and I'll keep on trying. But you are the ones who really can make a difference. If the business community in this amazing city takes the lead on this as you can, if you respond when Rich says please, if you start banging the drums, the rest of the world, the rest of the country, and then the rest of the world is going to respond. I'll just close by saying this, that just as that World War II generation in winning over the crisis of fascism in the 40s came back and were able to do all those things, this is also our chance to build up our capacity to do a lot of other stuff that needs to be done. You look around the world today and you see Darfur, the HIV/AIDS pandemic, 23 million AIDS orphans in Africa alone, all these tens of millions dying of easily preventable diseases. All they need is penicillin, clean water. How do we react to that? Usually by saying, well, that's a terrible political problem. It's not. It's a moral imperative. Long-running civil wars fought by child soldiers on drugs, hunger, grinding poverty. I know that we're not going to solve all the problems in the world. Don't get me wrong. I'm not so naive as to think that. But I do believe this, that we are on the cusp of a new era during which we will begin to see ourselves as part of a worldwide civilization, gathered up in nation states as we will always be, taking pride in the places where we live and the nations of which we're citizens. But we now face common challenges worldwide. And the gaining of that moral authority and vision to address them in the way we need to address them can come by successfully solving this climate crisis. Not too many years from now, our children will ask us one of two questions. And you can write this down, trust me on this. It'll be one of two. I don't see a third out there. Either they will look back on us here at the beginning of the 21st century and they'll ask, what in the world were they thinking? Didn't they hear the scientists practically shouting from the rooftops? Didn't they smell the fires, see the ice melting, feel the heat? Didn't they understand what was at stake? Didn't they care enough to do something about it? or they will ask a second question, the one I believe they'll ask, the one I want them to ask. I want them to ask of us, how did they find the uncommon moral courage to rise and do what so many said was impossible to do, and get their act together and solve that climate crisis in good time? That's our challenge now. Thank you very much. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Al. Again, we are going to the other ballroom, and we ask you to stay in your seats during the question and answer period. Thank you very much. Here, I think you would all agree with me that Al's remarks were quite inspiring and expected from such a great American. We have a series of questions that have been submitted by a questions committee of the Economic Club, so I'd like to go through them with the Vice President. First one, Mr. Vice President.
Bill kind of reminds me of Charlie Rose.
Thank you. I think. What do you see the future of the Kyoto Protocol and also the upcoming treaty talks?
The Kyoto Protocol was always intended as a first step and as a beginning. It hasn't even really taken effect yet. Under its terms, it will take effect from 2008 to 2012. The United States is not a party. The developing countries, including China, are not in the first phase of it. But many countries have already begun to comply with it. And Europe has instituted a Europe-wide emissions trading system. It got off to a rough start, but has been recalibrated and is now a great success, I think widely recognized as such. And many other countries are as well. Some states in the U.S. are aiming at Kyoto-like standards, and almost 700 cities have now embraced Kyoto. But the action is going to shift to the next treaty, which will be based upon Kyoto, but will be a little more expansive, and the targets will be more ambitious. They have to be. They just have to be. Let me give you an example of why it's not unrealistic to think this can happen. The negotiation on the new treaty begins in Indonesia, in Bali, the first, December 3rd through the 14th. And I'm going to Bali, and there will be, I'm optimistic about it. Let me use a quick example, Bill. The first crisis of the global atmosphere was the hole in the stratospheric ozone layer. And don't worry, I'm not going to go into that. I just want to make one point. When the scientific evidence was finally to the point where the alarm bells went off, when the hole opened up above Antarctica, we had a Secretary of the Interior named Don Hodel who said floppy hats and sunglasses are the way to deal with this. And Ronald Reagan did not listen to Hodel. He listened to George Shultz and some others who said, no, we've got to act. And Ronald Reagan, a conservative Republican, joined with Tip O'Neill, a liberal Democrat, and they listened to the scientists instead of censoring them, and we got a treaty, Montreal Protocol. But then 3 years later, 3 years into the 10, they met again and toughened the standards. Now, Kyoto is like Montreal. It was the first reaction. The next one will be probably completed in 2009 in Copenhagen. And I've called for them to move that date up from 2012, when it's supposed to take effect, to 2010. And what I'm working to do is to create the conditions, along with y'all, I hope y'all, many of you already are helping, to create the conditions in the United States so that whoever is inaugurated as president on January 20th, 2009, regardless of party, will face a new transformed political situation here at home where enough Americans to make a critical mass will say we are ready to solve the climate crisis. If that's the case, then we could have a new, much better treaty in place and ratified and effective worldwide partway through 2010. And that's what I think we ought to shoot for.
As China and India grows their economies, they also increase their emissions at a rate that will dwarf those in the United States. To achieve these reductions, such as those which you believe are necessary, China and India obviously will have to change their course. What do you think is the best way to get the results from both of those countries that we need to be successful?
Well, clearly the one essential step is for the United States to provide leadership. And since we're the country that is the natural leader of the world, we have the strongest economy in the world, we have the technology, we're best positioned to solve this. If we get with it and provide leadership on it, then China and India are going to feel the moral pressure. And they're not immune to such pressure, by the way. I mean, we have a misconception that China doesn't care about the environment. Their auto environmental standards are way above ours. They have the biggest tree planting program in the world, bar none. They have installed more solar units last year than all of the United States, Western Europe, and Japan combined. They now have, for IPOs, these companies have to have an environmental officer and a climate change plan. They are aggressively moving to address CO2 reduction. Now, there's a lot they're not doing, and I don't want to paint a rosy Pollyannish picture. Their pollution is growing by leaps and bounds. And if they have not already passed the U.S. in CO2 emissions, they will within the next 6 months. The scientists I trust on these numbers say that they're close. They haven't done it yet, but they will. India's far back, but of course they're growing also, and their emissions are not at the same scale of China's. But the U.S. and China are right neck and neck now and will remain neck and neck for a while. If we lead and we start solving this, China has enough reasons of its own where it will face a lot of pressure to get on board. I've given my slideshow over there many times. I have had all the graphics translated into Chinese, and I don't speak Chinese, of course, but work with the interpreters and show the graphics in Chinese. And I'm telling you, their leaders get it at the national level. Their scientists are among the world leaders on this. Let me give you one phrase. The leading Chinese science expert on the melting ice is Professor Yao Tan Dong. And he points to the Tibetan Plateau in the Himalayas, 100 times as much ice and snow as all the mountains of Europe. And he calls it the water tower of Asia. Now, in all the little towns in Tennessee, they've got water towers. Chicago's too big to have a water tower. But you just think of that image of Asia having a big water tower. That's what it is. And the Yangtze River and the Yellow River are among the ones that come from that ice field. And it's melting. And they're scared. And there are many months, many years now where there's no water in the Yellow River. It doesn't reach the sea anymore in some years. And the Yangtze, 20 times more typically, is also now being affected. And the dust storms coming off the drying margins of the Gobi Desert are putting a little film of yellow dust all over Beijing many weeks out of the year. And they're worried about hosting the Olympics in the midst of a pollution haze. And there are many reasons why they are poised to do the right thing if they can just get up the momentum to tell these regional politicians and the business and industry heads that are so tight with them that they've got to get rid of the most inefficient, dirty coke burning plants in the world and modernize and reduce the pollution. And they're not that far away from making that commitment.
Given the increasing demand for low carbon electricity, should the U.S. join other countries such as France, Germany, and England in encouraging the development of nuclear power?
Well, I would like to see the marketplace have a big role in that decision. And the market has turned thumbs down on these big nuclear plants. Not a single new one's been ordered since 1973. There may have been a development last week that I'm not up to date on. But I come from the Tennessee Valley Authority area. I used to represent Oak Ridge, where we're immune to the effects of radiation. And I used to be very enthusiastic about nuclear power, and I'm not a reflexive opponent of it today. But I am skeptical that it's going to play more than a small incremental role. And here's why. Leave aside the two problems that people normally talk about, the storage of the waste and the safety of the reactor operation. They're both serious problems. But let's assume both of those can be solved. That still leaves two. for the 8 years that I was in the White House, and I just realized, Bill, I forgot to brag on what a good job you did as cabinet member, as the Commerce Secretary. I hope everybody in the other room is still listening to this. I got in talking about everybody else there, and I forgot to brag on you as much as I had wanted to, Bill. We did NAFTA together. We did the global economy together. You did such a spectacular job as Secretary of Commerce and was such a close advisor. Thank you so much, and thank you for all your help to me. But the 8 years that I was in the White House, which we overlapped in, every single nuclear weapons proliferation issue that we dealt with was connected to a reactor program. And the dangers in Iran and North Korea today are linked to their reactor program. Now, if we decided that we were going to pick nuclear reactors as the silver bullet, we'd put tens of thousands of them all over the world in places like Cambodia and Burma and Chad and you name it, and Sudan, and that means we'd have weapons possibilities in a lot of places where we just don't want them. Final challenge, also on that, within a few decades, the uranium would run out, and they'd have to go to the highly enriched and plutonium, and that problem would get more dangerous. But the final issue is economics. These plants are the most expensive, they take the longest time to build, and they only come in one size, extra large. And the economies of scale kind of dictate that. Maybe that'll change. But if you are a utility executive with a fixed construction budget, you're going to pay attention to what these high energy prices are going to do to demand. And oil hit $88 a barrel today. Where's it going? 150? Back down to 85? Who knows? But the uncertainty makes it difficult for these utilities to project how much they're going to need. And the uncertainty itself makes them less anxious to bet all of their budgets on big, long time to build increments. They want more flexibility. So there'll be some more nuclear power plants, and some of them will be in the U.S., but it's not a silver bullet. We don't have a silver bullet. We've got silver buckshot, and that'll be part of the buckshot.
Many companies have taken the issue of sustainability as a key business imperative. Do you believe that these efforts are sincere? And could you provide this group of business leaders with any examples of where you see it being done right?
Well, there are a lot of, yes, a lot of them are sincere. Of course, some of them are not. The phrase greenwashing is one that you have heard, and unfortunately that's an issue, but that's human nature. You're always going to see that. And it's also the case that in some cases, businesses that start out trying to give the impression that they're doing the right thing, keep at it long enough that pretty soon they're doing the right thing. And, that's the way a lot of change occurs anyway. I mentioned Walmart in the other room, very controversial company. I know, controversial in Chicago too. But in some areas, they still are controversial. But they made a basic decision to try to address this climate crisis. And they are now using their scale and their market power to spread a lot of the new technologies that become cost effective when they sell as many units as Walmart sells. And they're putting windmills on many of their roofs. It's a great example. DuPont's another one. They drug their feet decades ago. Then they got with the program. They've made money doing it. General Electric also has made it, their whole theme now, and they're doing a lot of good things. There are many, many similar examples.
Who are your heroes and who inspires you today? Is it all the people that you've met in your life and observed around the world? Who really has inspired you?
Well, in all seriousness, my dad was a real hero to me, and I dedicated my book this year to him, and he was he and my mother both made a big mark on me. If you're asking me about the world leaders out there today that I've had a chance to meet, Nelson Mandela really stands out in a lot of respects. You went to that deal with us, and you remember when, after he got out of prison and became president, he wouldn't allow them to release him before they agreed to his terms. But while he was still in prison, 27 years, and we went out and saw the little cell where he spent that time. He made friends with one of his jailers, and during that period when they were negotiating, he got secret passes to leave the prison, Robbins Island. It's like Alcatraz, you know, it's isolated but visible. And he came in and spent time with the family of his jailer. And this is, you know, what you'd say is it's a blue collar job, and this guy's, he'd been a jailer all his life, working for the prison system. And the day of that inauguration, we went out to the presidential house, and they had a big old tent set up on the grounds, and probably 1,000 people in that tent. And Mandela stood up and told this story about his friendship with that jailer, and Caucasian, of course. And at this moment of triumph, when a black South African had reclaimed the leadership after 400 years of apartheid, of the other system, in this moment of triumph, he extended his hand and asked this jailer to come up to the podium with him. And they hugged and embraced, and there wasn't a dry eye there. It's kind of hard to recreate the emotion of the moment or the eloquence of Mandela. But it symbolized for me the fact that he had a quality of greatness in his heart, where he turned what could have been suffering and bitterness in that jail cell into a magnanimous, inclusive embrace of everyone in the country that he was now beginning to lead. So I'd say of all the world leaders I've met, he's the one I'd pick.
Great. As we get closer to the As we get closer to the 2008 election, and I'm not go there, the internet has a much more prominent role than it obviously has in previous elections. How do you see the internet impacting our political processes, and what are the positives and negatives implications for the voting public?
Well, I'm a big fan of the new opportunities the internet makes possible. And like any new technology or powerful new tool, it does have good and bad things about it. And of course, as any parent or grandparent here knows, you've got to be extremely careful about children having unfettered access to the internet, because, Lord, the stuff that they can run into is just shocking beyond any thing that would merit that label in the past. I mean, you know, that was available to people's homes. And so, you know, we really have to be extremely careful with it. But among the really great things about it is that it gives a voice back to individuals. I wrote a book earlier this year called The Assault on Reason. Bill referred to it in the other room. The United States of America was built in a time when written essays and printed words gave individuals the ability to join in a national conversation about democracy and what we were going to do to make our future together. And throughout our early history, individuals, Thomas Paine would be an example, could affect the thinking of the mass by just being eloquent and speaking truth, or what was heard as truth by the majority. Now, a half century ago, television overtook the printed word, and it's been a one-way medium in the main. And it has great things too, but too often we just sit back and watch television, and it's a one-way flow of information. The average American's watching it 4.5 hours a day now, which is amazing. And 30-second commercials are the dominant influence on our political system. 80% of the budgets for Democrats and Republicans in the last election went to buy 30-second TV ads. And television is still the dominant medium. And it doesn't, in the main, it doesn't enhance democracy. I mean, it dumbs it down and tarts it up, and, you know. But the internet does now give us these new possibilities
for grassroots organizing, for delivering messages to people who want to hear about nuclear power, for example, or whatever other question you want to ask about. And I think that the internet is bringing new hope for a resurgence of democracy in the United States, and I think it's really needed. One of the dangers is that people will just talk to those who agree with them and not have the community gathering, the town square type phenomenon. But I think that actually we're seeing the town squares. We're seeing the new dialogue. So I'm very optimistic, bullish on the internet.
You've always been known for being on the leading edge of identifying both issues and opportunities on the horizon. What do you see on the horizon, and how should we be prepared as business leaders to address these issues, opportunities, and challenges?
Well, globalization is a reality that every business person here is already dealing with. The internet and the digitization of all communications, everybody's aware of that. I would just say in response to your question, Bill, that the climate crisis is not one among many challenges that we face. It is, thank you, it is the challenge that we face. And none of the others will matter very much until we get this one right. And when we get this one right, we really will enhance our ability to address the others. But as time goes on, 6 months ago, 4 months ago, more than half the country was in drought. There are now water restrictions still in place in a great many states. I won't go on with the list of these things, but they've been predicted, and now they're coming faster and harder than was predicted. We have got to solve this. We have got to solve it. There are no two ways about it. So whenever anybody asks me, look over the horizon, see what things are going on. There are a lot of things going on, and y'all know them, a lot that I don't know. But this one, we've got to solve it.
We have no shortage of information sources to provide us with business, political, and global intelligence. What sources do you most rely on for daily and weekly information that you truly trust?
Well, I go to the internet and I have bookmarks on probably, 15 or 20 different sites. I usually start with a Google News page that I've custom designed. They'll let you do that on Google News. And I go to current.com, but and I recommend current.com, by the way. That's the television network that I co-founded with Joel Hyatt, but I think it's fantastic. And then, a lot of the print media that I used to read in hard copy, I read on the internet now, and some of the websites that will collect stuff. I just think it's great. You can see the same thing from different perspectives, and you don't have to spend a lot of time on it. Pretty soon you can kind of get a sense of what's most important and move on.
Last week you were bestowed upon you an incredible honor when you received the Nobel Peace Prize. What was your reaction when you heard the news, and how do you plan to leverage this recognition to greater global awareness and therefore getting the world moving even more forward?
Well, on the last part of your question, I've been asking how can I best use the occasion of the award to further increase attention to the message and to get the message delivered more effectively. And anybody who has suggestions on that, I'm eager to hear them. A lot of close friends have given me suggestions, and I've got some ideas that I'll unfold as time goes on. But I do hope that it will increase the chances that I'll be able to deliver the message more effectively. As to how I found the news, I had gotten word that the news media had a kind of little build-up to it, and I managed my own expectations. I seriously did not think I was going to, really and truly did not, because I know that the way that thing operates, they just are disconnected from any of this kind of speculation, so I didn't believe any of it. But I naturally, read what was being written and so forth. And so they had said that the person who won would get a phone call 15 minutes ahead of the official announcement. And Tipper and I were out in California for current TV, and 2 a.m. California time was when the announcement was due to be made. So at 1:45, the phone didn't ring. So I didn't think anything of that. Until about 5 minutes later. And then I started looking at the telephone. And then about 2 minutes after that, I said to Tipper, well, I told you that that was all just speculation. And she said, well, honey, it's just such an honor to be nominated, and you ought to feel great about that. And I said, I do. And I did. And then about 2 minutes before 2 a.m., I said, well, honey, let's turn on CNN to see who did win. And so we turned it on, and this fellow started talking in Norwegian for an extended period. And I don't know whether it's because of Tipper's Swedish background. She went to the Swedish Museum here in Chicago. I went with her one time. Anyway, her family were Swedish immigrants on her mom's side. But I don't know if it was that or whatever, but after a few minutes of Norwegian, she looked at me and said, you won. And I said, what? She said, you won. And about 30 seconds after that, CNN put up a graphic that said I'd won. And so that's how I got the news. From Tipper.
You have also had a very successful business career and have had the privilege of serving on the board of directors of several companies whose creativity and innovation have revolutionized the way which we all utilize technology and also access information. What insights can you share with the business leaders in the room tonight about what has enabled these companies to be so successful with innovation?
Well, Apple and Google are unique, and I'm not certain that the lessons from their success are broadly applicable, but both of them emphasize creativity and innovation. And I do believe that we are living in an age where information, ideas, creativity, and innovation have a greater share of economic value than ever before in the past. Alan Greenspan is fond of saying that the value of the U.S. economy, everything produced since World War II, has quintupled in value, but the gross tonnage has stayed the same or gone down a little bit. And the difference is, in place of steel and plastic and wood and rubber and all the materials, innovation and information have taken the place and added value. And so investing in the creativity of people is, I think, one of the lessons from Google and Apple for sure. But even in industries that are not necessarily mainly focused on digital information, it's still the case. I think that in the age of computers and supercomputers, the ability of individuals to figure out new processes, new whole system redesigns, new ways of doing old things is now so much enhanced that that's one of the things that I think is most important. I've had, it's been fun for me to found two businesses in the last few years. I'm the co-founder of Current TV with Joel Hyatt, and I'm the co-founder of Generation Investment Management with David Blood, who was the former CEO of Goldman Sachs Asset Management. And the second business, by the way, I wanted to name Blood and Gore, but the other partners wouldn't go along with it, which I thought was a mistake. But anyway, it's been great fun. I've loved the business world. I really have. It's been really enjoyable.
Last question. Mr. Vice President, you have raised the issue of climate crisis to an incredible level. A few years ago, I don't think anyone would have expected that the world would be as attuned to this crisis as it is today, much to your credit. How optimistic are you that in this short period, as in your remarks you said we may have, that we really will have the courage, both political courage and the general public outcry for that courage to come forward to solve this problem?
Well, Bill, I am optimistic. I'm very optimistic. But I need to make it clear what that optimism is based on. There are a lot of scientists who have forgotten more about this stuff than I'll ever learn, who are very pessimistic. You take this fellow, James Lovelock, for example, very distinguished scientist in his 80s now. He just a fantastic inventor of the Gaia hypothesis, and anyway, great scientist. He is so dark and pessimistic on this now. But I believe I know one thing about politics that he doesn't know. Having spent 30 years in it, I know that on some occasions, the political system has one thing in common with the climate system. To use a scientific phrase, it's nonlinear, which of course means that as it can appear to move at a snail's pace, and then when it crosses a tipping point, marked by enough people making up their minds that we got to do something, then the political system can shift gears in a hurry and move with lightning speed. It doesn't happen that often. But in 1943, it would have been absurd to think the United States could build 1,000 airplanes. But by a year later, that was a small number. And we had geared up and we had decided we were going to do it. And President Roosevelt brought the auto executives in and told them what they were going to do. And one of them said, well, Mr. President, you know, this will really interfere with our ability to make automobiles. He said, no, you don't understand. We're not going to be making any automobiles. And that's a dangerous analogy. We're going to be making automobiles, but we need to make better automobiles. Not only because it's needed to solve the climate crisis, but we need to lead this new industrial revolution toward a low carbon economy, because it's good for business, it's good for so many other reasons. I believe that we are close now, Bill, to reaching that critical mass of public opinion, regardless of political party. I formed a group, by the way, called the Alliance for Climate Protection. Brent Scowcroft is on the board. Lee Thomas, who was President Reagan's EPA head. Ted Roosevelt IV, a Republican sky and investment banker. More Republicans than Democrats on the board. And it's nonpartisan, bipartisan. But we're focused on reaching that critical mass. I'm optimistic because every day I hear from business people, civic leaders, who just a year or so ago were saying this is nothing. Now they're saying we're going to help solve this. I love that. And I hope that many of you here who may not already be a part of that, I hope that you will become so. As I said in the other room, directed at you as well. If the majority of this group made up its mind to solve this problem, we'd be on the way to solving it. We really would be.
Al, on behalf of the Economic Club of Chicago, we deeply appreciate your being with us here this evening, and thank you for what you're doing for America and for the world. Thank you.
Thank you all very much.